They didn't know the old man they just mocked owned every chair, every plate, every dollar in this buffet. Rick Dawson held his salad tray with trembling hands. Creamy dressing dripped onto his shoes. His fingers shook as he tried to balance the lettuce and tomatoes. No one offered to help. No one even looked, except Brandon Cooper. Brandon rolled his eyes and sighed loudly, and he leaned towards another server and whispered, "That old man deserves to starve all day." Rick heard it clearly. He paused, staring down at his soggy salad. For just a moment he looked like just another fragile old man, invisible, weak, unimportant, but inside his chest tightened. His breathing slowed. Sadness rose in his throat like bitter water. They didn't know. This wasn't just an old man. This was Richard Dawson, the founder and owner of this entire buffet chain. And today, everything was about to change. Rick Dawson walked slowly into the buffet. His old brown coat hung loose on his thin shoulders. The sleeves were frayed at the ends. His black shoes were scuffed and dull. Each step was careful and quiet. He held a small tray close to his chest. His right hand trembled slightly. People passed by without noticing him. Servers moved quickly, ignoring his presence. But Rick's eyes were sharp. Behind his scratched glasses, his gaze scanned every corner. He saw the salad bar half empty. He noticed crumbs on the floor near the soup station. He saw customers waiting too long at the meat carving table. His face stayed calm, but inside his mind recorded everything, every sound, every face, every careless action. This was his restaurant. This was his life's work. And today he wasn't here as the owner. Today he was here as a silent observer. To see the truth others tried to hide. Rick looked down at his shoes. The leather was cracked and faded. Years of walking had worn down the soles. He saw his own reflection in a small puddle on the floor. Old, tired, quiet. His fingers gripped the tray tighter. The skin on his knuckles was rough and dry. Years of hard work had shaped these hands. His mind drifted back 30 years. He saw himself as a young man, standing behind the sink in the same kitchen, washing stacks of greasy plates late at night. Soap bubbles clung to his arms. Steam rose around his face, burning his eyes. He remembered the pain in his back, the cold tile under his worn-out shoes. But he never complained. He worked. He saved every dollar. He believed one day this place would be his. Rick blinked, returning to the present. He took a slow breath. Nothing about him looked powerful now, but deep inside, the fire that built this empire still burned strong. Rick lifted his eyes and looked around the buffet. He saw an old man struggling to scoop mashed potatoes onto his plate. His hands shook as he tried to hold the heavy spoon. Rick saw an elderly woman moving slowly with her walker. She paused near the soup station, breathing hard. No one offered help. People walked past her without a glance. His eyes softened. There was a quiet sadness in his gaze, but also warmth. He knew their pain. He knew what it felt like to be ignored. Rick watched as a couple in their 70s laughed softly at their table. They held hands across their trays. Their smiles were gentle and tired. Rick felt his chest tighten. This place was built for them. For families, for people who deserve kindness. He took a deep breath. His heart felt heavy. He wondered if his staff still understood why this buffet existed. Not for money, but for dignity and simple human respect. Rick closed his eyes for a moment. A memory came back to him. He was a boy again, sitting on the wooden porch outside their small house. The sun was setting behind the trees. His mother sat beside him. Her hands were rough from years of cleaning houses, but her touch was always gentle. She looked at him with tired eyes. "Richard," she said softly, "always respect old people." She brushed the hair from his forehead. "One day you will be old too, and you will want someone to see you, to treat you with kindness." Rick felt the breeze of that evening in his mind. He smelled her lavender soap. He heard her words like they were spoken just now. He opened his eyes. The buffet noise returned around him, but her voice stayed in his chest. A quiet reminder of who he was, and why he built this place. Rick opened his eyes. He looked around the buffet again. Servers moved quickly between tables. Customers talked and laughed over their plates. To them, he was just another quiet old man. He shifted his feet and felt a sharp pain in his knee. Age had slowed his body, but his mind stayed sharp. Every movement in this place spoke to him, every careless act, every silent kindness. He watched Brandon wiping a table with rough, angry motions. He saw Emily helping a woman carry her soup. He saw Danny in the kitchen, lifting heavy pots alone. Rick took a deep breath. He felt the weight of his years pressing on his chest. But he also felt something else, a rising certainty. In 5 minutes he would have to make a choice that would change everything, a choice that would reshape how this entire buffet worked. And no one here knew. What was about to come? Brandon Cooper stood near the salad bar. His apron was clean and neatly tied. His hair was styled perfectly, but his eyes were cold. An old man stood in front of him. He moved slowly, trying to decide what to put on his plate. His hand shook as he reached for the tongs. He hesitated, looking at the rows of vegetables. Brandon let out a loud sigh. He didn't hide his annoyance. He shifted his weight and crossed his arms. Other customers turned their heads at the sound. "Come on," Brandon muttered under his breath. "Hurry up, old man." Rick stood a few feet away, watching. He saw the old man's shoulders sink lower. He saw the pain in his eyes. Rick felt his own chest tighten. He wondered how many times this happened. How many times dignity was crushed by impatience. He clenched his fist around his tray. A quiet anger began to rise inside him. Jessica Williams stood near the kitchen door. Her phone was pressed tightly to her ear. She flipped through papers on her clipboard. Her brow was furrowed with stress. "Yes," she said quickly, her voice low. "I need 2 more boxes of chicken breast. An extra salad mix before noon." She scribbled notes without looking up. Around her, servers moved in and out of the kitchen. Brandon rolled his eyes at another customer. Emily carried plates to a table near the window. Jessica didn't see any of it. She didn't see the old man shaking at the salad bar. She didn't hear Brandon's sighs. She didn't notice Rick standing alone near the drink station. All she saw were orders, numbers, and deadlines. Her mind was locked on inventory and deliveries. She thought she was managing the restaurant. But she wasn't really there. Rick watched her in silence. He saw the weight on her shoulders, but he also saw what she failed to see, and it made his heart ache. Emily Carter noticed him from across the buffet. She saw his hands trembling as he held the heavy tray. His shoulders bent under the weight. His eyes searched the room for an empty table. Without thinking twice, she moved quickly towards him. Her black shoes tapped softly on the floor. She reached his side and smiled warmly. "Let me help you with that, sir," she said. Her voice was gentle and calm. She placed her hand under his tray, steadying it. The old man looked at her with tired eyes. For a moment, his face softened. Emily guided him through the crowded aisle. She walked slowly, matching his pace. Other customers stepped aside for them. Brandon watched from a distance, rolling his eyes again. Rick saw it all. He saw how Emily's small act of kindness changed everything, how it lifted the old man's spirit, even just a little. He felt a quiet gratitude in his chest. Finally, someone who still understood, someone who remembered what service truly meant. Emily held the tray firmly in her hands. She turned to the old man with a kind smile. "Would you like to sit near the soup bar or the salad bar today, sir?" she asked softly. The old man blinked. His eyes were cloudy with age. For a moment he seemed confused by her question. Then his lips curved into a small, grateful smile. "The soup bar, please," he whispered. His voice was thin and weak. Emily nodded. She guided him carefully through the tables. Rick watched every step. He saw how Emily slowed her pace to match his, how she checked each table to find one with a sturdy chair, how her hand stayed under his tray until he sat down safely. No rush, no impatience, only respect and gentle care. Rick felt a warmth spread through his chest. In a place filled with noise and hurry, her quiet kindness stood out like a light in the dark. Brandon stood near the end of the salad bar. He watched Emily help the old man to his seat. His lips curled into a smirk. He shook his head and muttered under his breath, "Old people like that should just stay home. They're always in the way." Another server glanced at him, frowning slightly. But no one said anything. Brandon shrugged and turned back to wiping the counter. His movements were rough and careless. Pieces of lettuce fell to the floor as he pushed them aside. Rick heard every word. His hand tightened around his tray. A dull pain spread through his chest, not from age, but from anger. He looked at Brandon's face. So young, so confident in his cruelty. Rick felt a sadness deeper than words. He wondered how long this poison had been growing here. How many silent moments like this had passed unnoticed. But today, it would not be ignored. Rick narrowed his eyes. Deep lines formed on his forehead. He stood still, holding his empty tray close to his chest, his gaze locked on Brandon. Brandon didn't notice. He kept wiping the counter with quick, careless strokes. He checked his reflection in the glass sneeze guard. He fixed his hair and smiled at himself. Rick's eyes moved slowly over Brandon's uniform. The crisp white shirt, the clean black apron, everything looked perfect on the outside. But the truth underneath was rotten. Rick took a quiet breath. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just watched. Every second felt heavy. He studied Brandon's face, his posture, his attitude. He saw the disrespect in his eyes. He saw the pride that blinded him. Rick's chest rose and fell with a silent sigh. A choice was forming in his mind. but he kept it hidden for now. In the kitchen, Danny Nguyen lifted a large pot of soup. Steam rose around his face, making his hair damp. His arms shook under the heavy weight. He gritted his teeth and took a deep breath. Through the small window to the dining area, he saw Brandon. Danny paused for a moment. He watched Brandon laugh quietly to himself. He saw the smirk still on his face. Danny shook his head. His eyes were tired. He felt a dull anger in his chest, but he said nothing. Slowly, he turned back to his work. He placed the pot on the stove with a heavy thud. Hot soup splashed onto his hand. He winced, but didn't complain. He wiped his hand on his apron and kept moving. Rick stood near the kitchen door. He saw everything. Danny's silent struggle. Brandon's careless pride. Rick's heart tightened again. He wondered how many good people like Danny were ignored, how many carried the real weight, while others just watched. Rick stepped back from the kitchen door. He looked out at the dining area. His eyes moved from table to table. Old couples eating quietly, a man in a wheelchair sipping soup slowly, a woman helping her elderly mother cut chicken. He felt a deep heaviness settle in his chest. He thought about Brandon's words, about the sighs, about the looks of annoyance. He clenched his jaw and asked himself, "Is that what we've become?" He swallowed hard. Is a person's worth only $10 now? Just the price of a buffet meal? His hands trembled slightly as he placed his tray on a nearby counter. He closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered his mother's voice. Respect old people. One day you will be like them. Rick opened his eyes again. His gaze hardened. If this place had forgotten its values, then it was a time for him to remind them. Brandon leaned against the counter. He watched the old man eat his salad slowly. His lips curled into a cruel smile. He shook his head and whispered to another server, "Look at him. Eating like he has all the time in the world." He laughed under his breath. "Honestly," he said, "by the time he finishes that plate, he'll probably be dead anyway." The other server didn't respond. She looked down at the floor, ashamed. But Brandon just shrugged and turned away. Rick heard every word. His chest tightened with anger. He felt his pulse pounding in his ears. He watched Brandon wipe his hands on his apron, still smirking. Rick took a slow breath to steady himself. The sadness he felt before began to harden into something else. A quiet decision was forming inside him. He knew now this wasn't just a bad attitude. This was rot, and it was spreading. Emily heard Brandon's words. She stood near the soup bar, holding a stack of clean bowls. Her hands froze for a moment. She looked up and watched him laugh to himself. Her chest felt tight. She saw the old man eating alone. His shoulders hunched, his hands shaking as he lifted his fork. Emily's eyes softened with sadness. She turned back to Brandon. Her gaze was steady but filled with disappointment. She wanted to speak, to tell him to stop, to remind him that every person here deserved respect. But she stayed silent. She lowered her eyes to the bowls in her hands. She felt a quiet frustration build inside her. Brandon didn't notice her look. He kept wiping the counter, humming a tune under his breath. He thought he was untouchable. Emily took a slow breath. She knew her words wouldn't change him today, but deep down she promised herself that she would never become like him. Rick stood still by the drink station. His hand gripped the edge of the counter. His knuckles turned white with tension. The thin skin on his hand trembled slightly. He felt his pulse beating fast. His chest rose and fell with each breath, but his eyes stayed sharp, focused. He looked at Brandon, wiping the counter with careless strokes. He looked at Emily, holding back her words. He looked at Danny, carrying heavy pots alone in the kitchen. Rick's jaw tightened. Deep lines appeared on his forehead. His eyes burned with quiet fire. For years he had trusted reports. For years he believed his managers. But today he saw the truth with his own eyes. The culture he built was fading, and it was his responsibility to bring it back. His hand trembled harder. Not from weakness, but from the storm building inside him, a storm ready to change everything. Around the buffet, customers paused for a moment. They heard Brandon's harsh words. They saw the old man eating alone with his head down. They noticed Emily's quiet sadness. But no one said anything, no one stepped forward, no one told Brandon to stop. A woman with gray hair shook her head slowly. A man in a blue shirt frowned and looked away. A teenage boy whispered something to his father, but the father just nodded and kept eating. The room felt heavy with silence. Plates clinked, forks scraped against dishes, but there was no real sound, only quiet acceptance. Rick watched them all. He saw their lowered eyes. He felt their fear of speaking up. He understood their silence, but it cut deep into his chest. He thought, when did we become people who see wrong and choose to stay quiet? His fingers curled tighter around the counter. The time for silence was ending. Rick took a deep breath. His chest rose and fell slowly. He reached up and removed his glasses. The thick lenses made his eyes look smaller, weaker. Without them, his gaze was sharp and clear. He folded the glasses carefully. His hand still shook slightly, but his grip was firm. He placed them in his coat pocket. Then he straightened his back. His old bones cracked softly with the movement. Pain shot through his knees, but he ignored it. He set his tray down on the counter beside him. The noise of the plastic tray hitting the surface was quiet, but somehow it felt louder than anything else in the room. Rick looked out across the buffet, at Brandon, at Emily, at Danny in the kitchen window, at every customer sitting in silent acceptance. He felt the heat of anger and purpose rising in his chest. Then, without another pause, Rick Dawson stood up. Today, things would change. Rick stood tall. His thin frame looked stronger now. His eyes moved slowly across the room. Brandon noticed him first. He frowned, confused, watching the old man stand without support. Emily paused near the soup bar. Her hands froze around a stack of bowls. Danny peeked from the kitchen window, sensing something was about to happen. The customers turned in their chairs one by one. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates. Even the sound of clinking glasses faded. Rick took a deep breath. His chest rose slowly. He felt every eye on him. He felt the silence pressing against his skin. He looked at Brandon with steady eyes, at Jessica still on her phone in the corner, at Emily, who watched with hope and fear. No one spoke. No one moved. In that moment, the entire restaurant fell silent, waiting for his next words. Rick took another breath. His voice came out low and clear. "My name is Richard Dawson." He paused. The words seemed to echo through the silent buffet. "I am the person who built this place." Brandon's eyes widened. He stepped back, bumping into a chair. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Emily felt her chest tighten. She clutched the bowls against her apron, staring at Rick with new eyes. Danny froze in the kitchen window. The heavy pot in his hands trembled slightly. Jessica lowered her phone. Her face turned pale as she realized who was speaking. Rick looked around at every person in the room. His gaze was calm but sharp. He saw the shock on their faces. He saw the sudden respect, the fear, the confusion. He stood there quietly, an old man in worn clothes. But now everyone knew he was also the man who owned everything they stood on. Brandon stood frozen. His face turned pale. All the color drained from his cheeks. He felt a sharp chill run down his back. His eyes darted around the room. Everyone was staring at him now. No one was laughing. No one smiled back at him. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He swallowed hard, feeling his throat tighten. The tray in his hands rattled softly. He quickly set it down on a nearby table, his fingers trembling. He tried to stand tall, but his shoulders slumped forward. He looked down at the floor, unable to meet Rick's eyes. His chest felt heavy. His heart pounded against his ribs, loud and fast. Sweat formed along his hairline. For the first time that day, Brandon felt truly small. He thought about his words earlier. About the old man he mocked. Now he realized he had been mocking the man who owned his future. Rick took a slow breath. His eyes stayed locked on Brandon. His voice came out calm, steady, and cold. "Brandon Cooper," he said clearly, "you are fired. Effective immediately." The words cut through the silent room like a blade. Brandon's head jerked up. His eyes widened in shock. "Wait, what?" he stammered. His voice shook. He glanced around, searching for support. No one moved. No one spoke for him. Rick didn't blink. His face was hard and still. "I will not let someone like you represent what I built," he said. Brandon felt his knees weaken. His chest rose and fell quickly. He opened his mouth again, but closed it without a word. He saw Emily watching him without eyes. He saw Danny staring from the kitchen, silent. Brandon lowered his gaze to the floor. For the first time, he understood the true cost of disrespect. Emily stood frozen by the soup bar. Her hands trembled around the stack of bowls. She heard every word Rick spoke. Each sentence felt like thunder rolling through the room. Her chest tightened. She felt tears gather in her eyes. She blinked quickly, trying to hold them back. But they stayed, shining softly under the buffet lights. She looked at Rick, at his thin frame standing tall, at his eyes clear and sharp despite his age. For a moment, Emily felt hope rise inside her, hope that kindness still mattered, that someone still cared about respect and dignity. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away with the back of her hand. She didn't want anyone to see. But inside her heart felt warm. She whispered to herself, "Thank you, Mr. Dawson." She knew this moment would stay with her forever. It reminded her why she chose to serve people with kindness no matter what. Rick turned his eyes towards Emily. His gaze softened as he looked at her tear-stained cheeks. He took a slow breath before speaking. "Emily," he said, his voice clear and steady. She straightened up instantly. Her hands tightened around the bowls she held. She felt her heart beating fast in her chest. Rick continued, "From today onwards, you are the new supervisor here." Emily's eyes widened. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Tears filled her eyes again, stronger this time. Rick nodded slowly. "You are the culture I want to build," he said. "Your kindness, your respect, your heart. That is what this place was meant to be." Emily felt her legs weaken. A quiet sob escaped her lips. She quickly wiped her tears with her sleeve, trying to stay contained, and she looked at Rick with deep gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson," she whispered. In that moment, she promised herself to lead with the same kindness she had always given to others. Rick walked slowly toward the kitchen. He pushed the swinging door open with his palm. Warm steam rushed out to meet him. The smell of soup and roasted meat filled the air. He stepped inside. The kitchen was busy and loud. Pans clanged. Oil sizzled on hot grills. Then he saw Danny. The young man stood near the stove, holding a giant pot of soup. The pot was almost as big as his torso. His thin arms shook under the heavy weight. Danny gritted his teeth. Sweat rolled down the side of his face. He shifted his grip, trying not to drop the pot. No one offered to help him. Everyone was too busy with their own tasks. Rick felt his chest tighten again. He watched Danny take careful, small steps towards the counter. Each step looked painful, but Danny never complained. Rick saw strength there. Quiet, humble strength. And he knew this young man deserved more. Rick stepped closer to Danny. He watched the young man set the heavy pot down on the stove. Danny exhaled with relief, wiping sweat from his brow. His shoulders slumped from exhaustion. Rick placed a gentle hand on Danny's shoulder. Danny flinched in surprise and turned quickly. His eyes widened when he saw Rick standing there. Rick looked at him with calm, steady eyes. "You work hard, son," he said softly. Danny swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say. He nodded slowly, breathing heavily. Rick squeezed his shoulder lightly. "I'm going to help you learn kitchen management," he said. "This job needs people like you, strong, quiet, responsible." Danny felt his chest tighten. Warmth spread through him. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. No one has ever seen his effort. He blinked back sudden tears and whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Dawson." For the first time, he felt hope rise inside him for a better future. Jessica stood near the kitchen door. She had watched everything silently. Her phone hung by her side, forgotten. Her eyes were fixed on Rick and Danny. She saw Rick's hand on Danny's shoulder. She saw the quiet respect in his words, and something inside her shifted. Rick turned toward her. Their eyes met. His gaze was steady and deep. "Jessica," he said calmly. She straightened her back, feeling her heart pound. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. Rick's voice was low but strong. "Management isn't about putting out fires," he said. "It's about building a system that never catches fire in the first place." Jessica felt a tear roll down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away. His words cut deep into her. She realized how tired she was from always reacting, never creating something better. In that moment, she promised herself to change, to lead not with fear but with wisdom and care. Rick stood by the front door. Emily stood beside him, holding a clean stack of trays. They both watched the customers walk in and out. An elderly man smiled at Emily as he passed. She nodded back with gentle warmth. A young mother guided her son to the salad bar. A group of old friends laughed quietly near the window. Rick breathed in deeply. He smelled roasted chicken, fresh bread, and warm soup, the smells of his life's work. Emily glanced at him. His face was calm, lines of age framed his eyes, but they shone with quiet strength. "Thank you for today," she whispered. Rick nodded slowly. "This place was always meant to feel like home," he said. They stood together in silence, watching people come and go, watching kindness move quietly between tables. For a moment, everything felt right. This is why he built it, and now he knew she would help keep it alive. Look around you. Every day you see people like Brandon, quick to judge, quick to hurt. They choose pride over kindness. But you also see people like Emily, quiet, patient. They choose to help even when no one is watching. Who will you choose to be today? Will you turn away from someone struggling? Will you roll your eyes at their weakness? Or will you reach out your hand like Emily did? Will you be the light in someone's dark moment? Because in the end, it's not about how strong you look. It's about how gentle you can be. Comment below. I choose kindness. Let the world see your choice. Let your words remind others that kindness is never wasted. It is the culture we build, one small act at a time.